So it's a couple days after that brain implosion. I can't remember how many now. But the last 2 nights I slept really well. I slept fine. No heart palpitation things. So I think it's been 2 good sleeps since that night that sort of brain death happened. And my body's feeling a lot heavier and slower, but I'm still functioning well. Today I had a strong urge to read through my balancing brain chemistry notes that Peter Smith gave me to review because there's so much information. So I had that urge because I need to remind myself of the different orthomolecular epigestures that I need to do depending on what kind of states come up for me. And today I'm feeling sort of objectively blind, meaning I kind of want to go to the beach later, but I almost feel like driving would be quite difficult. Subjectively, I'm not slow. I'm reading over these notes and comprehending them well. I'm able to read them, but I also feel kind of like, ooh, it almost feels as if I'm in this fine line of crossing over to a point where reading would be very challenging or impossible, or it's something that I wouldn't want to do. And that feels like that could happen anytime. And that could also be why I feel this urge to review them before I can't. And that's why I created this handy sheet so I could quickly review things at a glance. But reading over it is very helpful because even in the bit that I've read so far, I realized that I used to take Polygala and I ran out of it. And I didn't reorder because the shipping to Canada was a bit expensive. But here I have Amazon Prime USA, and you can get so much more on Amazon Prime USA. There's all this different kind of Polygala. There's the one from New Tropics Depot, which is the one I got before. But if I go on Amazon Canada, there's no Polygala Chinese Yangzhou powder. But here there is, so I might try to research which herbs I take that I can get in powder form on Amazon Prime USA and get those and start taking some as spoonfuls in like warm water, hot water. Peter Smith does give all these types of instructions in his documents, but for me at the time it was a matter of the easiest way to use them, which was just to get the capsules of most things. I take powder of glycine. I did take capsules of glycine, but I ended up getting powder because it's quite a bit cheaper. And I think that's true for most of them, but it's quite challenging to take all these powders and things when one doesn't have a proper kitchen and setup. As it is, I have all that stuff there to manage. And so it's a lot. But I do think it's helpful because I haven't experienced a depression this whole year. I've had some slowing down in function, but even that is getting easier and it's not very long lasting. So even though I haven't been able to completely taper off the medications, right now I'm on 2 quetiapine for 50 milligrams, my functionality is pretty good. Even though I didn't really function the greatest in the summer back home because I just showered and sort of hung out in parks and rested. But that's okay. I still was able to like see friends and work a bit more before I left, and it was really enjoyable. So it doesn't really matter like how much one gets done when, because even in these last 2 months, I've like kind of downloaded lyrics and hear the tunes for probably about 30 different songs. Now, I don't have the skills to put them into songs right now in terms of, I have a bit of piano skills and electronic music making skills, but even just to hear the melody and try to translate that into some kind of music, like I can hear all the music and the lyrics and the melody, but so if I was fully trained as being able to produce that, I could sit down and do that, but I'm not. So that can be for later. And so there has been quite the harvest of that energy, of that creative energy. And that's the thing too, a lot of times when one is in that state of harvesting, there's so much information and so much beauty and so much art and creativity and richness. It's impossible to create it all. But if one harvests it, the brain feels like, okay, I harvested it. It's kind of like if there's a farmer who wants to save seeds or has this huge crop of apples and needs to make like jam and preserves and make it so these apples last, because the apples are perishable. They're going to decompose. But the thing is, if the farmer makes time to make them into preserves and to preserve them and to pickle things and to save the seeds, now they can eat and be fueled from the harvest for a long time. If they just put the pile of apples in a pile, they're just going to rot and be food for the other animals and stuff, which isn't a big deal. But the thing that I'm saying is these seeds and these fruits, we can harvest them and put them in like our preserves, like put them in our Apple notepad, put them in, videos of us talking to ourselves about our ideas. We can put them into audios of us talking about our ideas for later of what to create. We can write plans of, oh, I had all these ideas, but I don't have the skills to unfold them. So I need to take business classes, or I need to take electronic music production classes. Or I download a song, but I'm not interested in making music at all. Maybe I can share it with a friend and see if they want to utilize it. And maybe I can make a friend by reaching out to them and saying, hey, this is what I have. Do you want it? So we can share some of these. Or maybe it's a business idea and we can take it to a friend and say, hey, do you want this business idea? So we can figure all that out. And something that I'm going to do is put some of these ideas eventually into Basecamp. I'm learning how to use that a little bit here, so it could be cool to do that and then invite certain people to the teams. I don't know how to do this, but I think it could be something to put the information into, so then when people come along, it's already there, and just saying, hey, this is what I have in that area. What do you think? Go ahead and use whatever you want. I don't care. Like, there's no way I can utilize all this information. So, yeah, sharing it with friends, because there's some interesting stuff. And, so it was nice to be here and be in that harvesting state and be able to harvest a lot of it and also have a lot of it unfold, because this place is so beautiful. Now, if I went into the energy around like ugliness and not the greatest energy and not feeling safe to fully manifest physically, poetically as well, which I've realized can manifest as like capriciousness, rapid changes in mood. Though I don't experience rapid changes in mood, I personally experience rapidly changing the way that my behavior manifests, because it's based on the situation, and situations change rapidly, so I adjust accordingly. But with so many different people around, people don't really notice as much, because maybe I manifest around person A a certain way and person B is another way, but person B doesn't know that I manifest around person A the way I do because they weren't there. And then it gets more complex the more people that are around. But when there's a really loving space, people realize that it's okay for somebody to be joking around sillily with one person in one situation, and then at lunch with everyone be kind of quiet. It's just not a big deal. Whereas if there are people around that are really attached or like invested in how a person manifests, like family, then they're like, well, why did you change and what's going on? And they're looking for so many more motives and causes and measuring with their brain so much more. And those images that are projected, if you think in quantum physical terms, the observers affect the situation. You can't separate the observers, who's watching the situation, who's participating in the situation, from the situation. Everybody's bringing some element to the table. They're bringing their projections, and we're all sort of complicit and playing out of a lot of those in order to make people feel comfortable that the world they're projecting is actually what's happening, when it's not. But anyway, I won't talk about that too much now. I'm writing down a lot of things that hopefully I can create something a little more coherent and concise for people at some point. Might not be necessary. It might be necessary only to live my life and utilize the tools of people who are around me, like Steve Pavlina, starting to do his subjective reality course soon. That's why I need to study this orthomolecular stuff to know these gestures. But hopefully when I really get in alignment with the subjectivity, the inner subtle realm that I want to manifest objectively, and I'm really clear on that and able to say no to partial matches, as Steve Pavlina says, and no thank you. And learning the language of the quantum of no thank you to these Newtonian paths that come here, to be like trying to translate the quantum into what they see as how reality's unfolding, and being like, no, that's not how it is. That's not how it works. That's nice if that's how it works for you. Continue to enjoy that if you like, but that's not how it works for me. And saying, you and I, we're not really a we at this moment. And that's okay. Maybe some other moment now in the future, so-called future. But last night I had this really interesting experience with this man who, we talked about quantum physics, and I was trying to explain that a lot of times my brain works really fast, and I feel that it's sort of quantum, if you want it, as a metaphor at least, as opposed to Newtonian. So it can process a lot of information, see possibilities, and I explained a lot of the different past things. And it was interesting to present my story in the framework of the quantum brain coming online and the different things that have happened in my life, starting from when I was in my early 20s and I drank myself stupid and kind of had a seizure. And then after that, my whole perception changed. I was dizzy. I had like this chronic fatigue, like MS-like thing for years. And I was really afraid of it. And I lost my capacities to recall from memory. And I thought it was a bad thing. But really, I'm seeing it as, my perception changed. I could see like this weird energy everywhere. Like lines on the wall, like door frames were vibrating. So I think I just started to see things more like energy, and I didn't realize it. I couldn't recall and pass my university exams, but really my brain was relying less on memory. It was changing from focal vision to the whole visual field, like peripheral. And so I felt like I couldn't see anything because I couldn't really use my focal vision anymore. I was diagnosed with shopping mall syndrome, which is visual vestibular mismatch. Felt like the ground was moving underneath me. I was dizzy. So they said that my visual system was making up for my lack of balance in the vestibular system. And as such, if like a lot of my capacity of vision was devoted to that. And because of that, it felt like I couldn't see, and I had trouble seeing, and my body was numb. There were so many things. It took many years to recover, but I feel like now that's why I have access to the whole visual field, which is sometimes information overload. So here I am thinking that this all started with my bipolar diagnosis 7.5 years ago, but really it started a long time ago, 15 years ago, when I sort of damaged my brain with alcohol, quote. And, that led to a bunch of other stupid stuff. But I'm seeing the value in that now from this other perspective. But not to go into that too long right now, but I was telling the guy about C-minders, S-E-E minders. So instead of reminders, trying to use the mental images to remember things, leaving things out strategically in space. So when one has access to the whole peripheral vision, the choicelessness will just, at the speed of light, you'll see the object and remember what it is that you left it there for. And, like leaving your keys by the door, people do that, but you can leave other things in certain places so you remember to utilize them. And for me, if things are in cupboards, I don't remember that they're there. So I like to have things out. But anyway, another way is to practice like putting your hand here and seeing if you can see how many fingers you have held up by looking straight ahead. I remember a friend did that, and they kept putting fingers out like right beside me where I shouldn't really be able to see, and I could always guess. And that is an important thing, is to be more in all the whole peripheral vision field, because thought projects like a focal vision and is looking for something in particular, and then we miss all that's around us. And that doesn't even mean to be like a spiritual thing, like beauty is all around. It's like what you need is right in front of you, and you really can't act and gesture towards what's not even there. So why are we moving based on these mental movements of looking for what's not there, when if we really can see with our whole visual field what is there, we can act on those things, act with those things. And, maybe we have all these healthy wellness tools around us and we can't even see them literally because we're thinking so much about something else. And if we look around, we might be like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. All of a sudden we realize we can act on our environment, in our immediate environment. And when we do that in a fluid, choiceless, joyful way, it's like a fun game. Now I get to play with everything that's around me. And if that's really fun, like my gestures are interesting, and it's like a better game than anything else. And that's kind of what happens in so-called manias, where all of a sudden realize, wow, I can really interact with everything that's here, and what's right here is what I want to interact with now. And there's this immediacy, and that builds a lot of energy because we're acting based on what is, not on what we think should be. But at some point we see this great vision and then start acting on what we think should be, and that gets us in trouble because we take those visions personally, like we need to carry them out ourselves now, when that's the same thing as acting based on ideas and thought. We're acting based on something that's not there. So it's lovely to see those visions and be like, wow, that's beautiful. And when the brain cells see those visions, when one brain sees it, it increases the capacity or the possibility that another brain will see it too. And the more people see the vision and realize, hey, there's nothing that we can do about that vision. All we can do is what's right in front of us now. All we can do is do what you can where you are right now. And that's something I learned from Dion B. Mall. That's what he says, doing what we can from where we are. And he also says in his Friends to Mankind movement, in considering you, consider another too, and may your success be the success of mankind. And those are very interesting principles. And I'm seeing that there's this thing about looking at one's conditioning, but there's also a movement beyond it. And I feel that this being in this body has been beyond it at times. And so one doesn't have to necessarily purposefully look at conditioning, sit down intentionally and do it, though one can. But when one sees it's possible to go beyond, there's something there, and the brain goes into these possibility states and wondering, well, what's really possible for my life now? And I've lived some of those possibilities, but now it's like there's also this movement of how to share that with other people, to make this possible for others, to, whether it's people who've been diagnosed or I don't know. So anyway, yesterday, I basically said to this guy, because a few videos ago I said, people just don't want this, and if they don't want it, they don't want it. This guy, when I was explaining my brain, and we were going over this book called, I think it was Quantum Weirdness, or by this Philip something, and there were a few points, like 6 points. And in what I'd shared with him, I'd already given examples of quantum at the macro level in my own life. And then the ones that I hadn't, I gave examples of that, like stories that I had that to me confirm that quantum exists at the macro level, like we can see it with our own eyes. If our brains are operating fast enough. If they're not, if they're in this Newtonian I want, and we're only looking for what I want, we can't see what's happening. We can't see the quantum weirdness. But in the quantum thing, he said, something can be in 2 places at once. So sometimes I've seen like 2 pairs of the same glasses in the same, like, it's impossible. There shouldn't be 2 pairs, one over here and one over there. But somebody that's looking for this or that is never going to see, this is impossible, that this is this there and it's also here. And now I have 2 pairs that I grabbed from 2 different spots, and this is impossible. But other people don't see that because, even with a magic trick, or those videos on YouTube where they change the scene and nobody notices that the person changed their shirt from red to green. How are we going to notice this quantum thing if we don't even notice something as simple as that? So noticing the quantum can be maddening too. And it was, and it is, because it's weird. It's impossible. It's beyond the possible. Like there's this conditioning state, which is limited and like Newtonian and projection of beliefs and all this like really lame stuff. And then there's, possibility. And then there's impossibility, which is, I have the book by Stan Grof called When the Impossible Happens. I haven't read it though, but I've been living it. So I don't know if I have to read it. So anyway, this guy basically got to this point where he said, I want this perception action. I want to be able to see this. I want to have insight. I said, well, he's like, kind of like, can you give it to me? I'm like, well, I really don't know. And I tried to talk about communion with nature because we are nature, and nature and Gaia and the cosmos has to trust us in order to give us this ability to have a fast brain and see a lot. Because with what we see, we must be responsible. And I've messed that up a million times, but it doesn't matter because you start again and you figure it out again. That's the thing with the self. It thinks, oh, because of this and because of this, it's game over and now I have to do this. Cause and effect. No, it doesn't work that way. Just start from a blank slate. Get back to the drawing board. And that's what the quantum does. It'll erase everything that you try to do if you mess it up. And it'll fix it if you mess it up, really. Because it trusts you, so you get to keep going. And try again as you in the same body. You could even be killed and get to try again in the same body at the same age. Sound impossible? Well, anyway, you don't want to go that way. You want to like be careful with your body and your life because that is a really challenging quantum path. So he said, I want it. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll try to give it to you. But I also said to him, you have to have a relationship with nature. He's like, well, I buy flowers and I look at them. I'm like, talk to them, read them poetry, sing them a song, ask them about themselves, like really like try to develop this relationship. And I can go into that more later. And I was telling him about the story with the flies because that's sort of when it started. The flies came to me. Nature came to me for some reason. And it was kind of impossible how they wouldn't fly away. And that video is called The Fly Whisperer. So anyway, I see this like golden green light, and I've seen that magic land when I'm falling asleep and it feels like my eyes are wide open, but I realize, holy shit, that golden green light comes into my apparent daily waking consciousness. I just haven't really clued into that. So, truth is a magic land. Truth is a quantum land. It's pathless, full of possibilities and impossibilities that can be transcended. So the book Quantum Jumps talks about this, and I read it at some point and then got really mad that they don't apply this thinking to people with mental health issues, but how could they if they've never had that sort of diagnosis and path themselves? So compassion. So with this guy, we stared at each other for, I don't know how long, 5 or 10 minutes without blinking. I probably had to blink like 2 times, but we kept going, and he saw me aging. Like he saw me at all these different ages, and we talked about it after. He's like, yeah, I saw you age, like you were an old woman. And I said, I saw you as kind of an old woman. And I'm like, whoa, past lives. And when you really look at someone this way, you see you don't know what they look like. It keeps changing and morphing. And then after, you kind of see what you think they look like. But I realized that maybe his gift, when we really look at each other with love like this, we do give each other our gifts. Like we give them the gift of looking with love, the light out of a loving eye. They do the same. Then we download their gift, and they download ours, and there's a mixture, and each brain starts to flower more. And I realized, well, the gift he kind of gave me was to see me get old. So maybe he kind of helped me stabilize in this path of, okay, just like grow up and get old now. Like you don't need to quantum jump and like die and feel like you're dying. Just not that that's a problem. It's not scary anymore. But I was like, thank you for seeing me old, because that probably increases the likelihood that I will get old and die instead of die at a young age. And I don't know why I saw him as kind of a woman, this old woman, what it was. But yeah, I told him a bunch of weird stuff, but the whole, when we were looking at each other without blinking and the greenish gold light came in, at least I could see it. I don't know what he could see. He said it looked kind of foggy. And it does make things foggy because everything turns into a wave and turns into energy. It's vibrating, and you know, it's not collapsed in the wave function of giving it like a sure form from the observation, because there's no observer. It's love is looking, and love would look and provide the openness for that being to be and be fluid and be what they are and change and morph. And so looking in that way and what one sees is also a manifestation of that gift of be what you are, you know. This person, if we're both conditioned to some extent, we're not exactly as we would want to be. Because who wants to be how others have said that we should be? But that blueprint is always there in the adjacent light miracle body. Always there for the compassion algorithm of the universe to come in and sort of save us from our mistakes when necessary. But otherwise it lets us make our mistakes. But when we make a fatal mistake, sometimes miracles that are unexplainable by science have to happen in order for us to continue. And sometimes somebody's watching and then they're like, how the hell did that happen? That's impossible. When we could just say, wow, that's a miracle. Thank you. I'm glad that person survived, and move on with it. And yeah, because sometimes what happens is there are observers who have certain beliefs, but what happens obviously is something that is unbelievable and impossible by the laws of physics. And so when somebody sees that, it kind of blasts apart what they think is possible. So I give the example of, I don't know, I heard a story years ago of a man or somebody, there was a plane crash and somehow someone managed to jump through the window of the plane and get out. And first of all, I don't even know if the glass broke or it did break. It did, but later they looked and their head wouldn't even fit through the window. So what happens is sometimes we go into being a wave. Like we're both a particle function or a body and a wave body. Sometimes when absolutely necessary, there's a miracle, and basically the person just was able to jump through the wall of the plane and the window, and or bend time to shrink to be able to get through, or they're just meant to be saved. And then people come and say that was impossible. Well, we don't understand quantum physics, and the quantum would rather us not be in these terrible accidents and have to go into waves to save us, because others that see that are like, wow, that couldn't have happened, but it did. So the impossible can happen. Miracles do happen, and who knows why they happen to certain people and not to others. But it's possible. The truth is they happen to everyone, but we go on in we jump to a different quantum world and then wake up from a bad dream if we die, but then others in that world experience us as dying, and then it's very sad. But we kind of go on, and then we're still with the same beings, and in our world we didn't die, so those beings are still in relationship with us. And so it's really, really messed up, because he was talking about the many worlds, or every possibility exists simultaneously. And if that's true, then all future possibilities exist. So everything that could be created has already been created, and it's a matter of which beautiful creation do we want to live out? Well, obviously the one we're designed for. And we can figure that out somehow. And that's where I am a little bit figuring it out. But before I left, I saw Dion Vimal speak, and he did a talk, and I listened, and I didn't feel like, I felt like I was seeking, but at the end he said, one thing you must do is share this with another. So last night was a bit of an opportunity to share this energy, and he asked for it. So I was like, okay, I'll try. I don't know if I can. I really don't know what's possible. And the funny thing is that when I was kind of mad that day, like, people don't want this energy, there's so much of it, I'd like to share it. not in terms of like some woo-woo thing, but just, here's a nice piece of chocolate. Would you like some? Just lovely, friendly gestures like that. I'd rather do it that way, in like this very humble human way, than, here, let me sit here and like stare in your eyes and then say, I wonder if you see what I see, which is what that guy said to me when I was in Santa Barbara 8 years ago. He said, we did the stare thing in a cafe for like 10 minutes without blinking. And then he said, I wonder if you see what I see. And I think he gave me some of that vision. And he passed on the same capacity to have a relationship with nature. So hopefully I did that. I really don't know. It's not up to me. It's a matter of grace and luck. For some reason, I feel like I've been touched with that sometimes. I don't know. I also feel like my capacity to possibly be a healer is coming online a bit. You know, so if I'm able to develop capacity to heal with my hands, then I don't have to use all these words. I don't have to say, here, let me convince you of something. If I can stare in someone's eyes for a few minutes and give them my hands, that's a lot easier than all these like millions of words that I've created for myself. Not that that's wrong. It was an important step. And in these past couple months, I had this phase of trying to explain myself, but that really created the self. By trying to explain something that's unexplainable, it makes it seem like a personal thing. But when one's able to heal and look at someone with the light of love, this golden green light from the heart, just say, here, have this. Just like, take it. It's right here, take it. And not like, oh, this and that and this explanation and quantum this and quantum that and reading a huge book on quantum physics. It's just like, here's my hand, look in my eyes. And then I get that person's gift as well. Like, the thing we don't realize when we get jealous and angry, if somebody else is starting to shine a little bit, like they do with so-called bipolar, is that when we're able to look at someone with complete unconditional love, that light unconditions the person, gives them permission to flower as themselves. And when we really do that, we actually download that person's miracle body gift. Like, we don't get the whole thing, they get it because they get to embody it and flower into it. But we get a subtle impression of it. So then that capacity could come in handy at some point. And I did that with a homeless man too. When I took him out to coffee, we stared in each other's eyes, and I feel like I downloaded the strength of the homeless people. Like, they trust me, and I see that I am one of them. And, you know, I'm 1 second away from being homeless and on the streets and rejected myself. And so, you know, when I needed that strength to sort of just be laying on the street and all of a sudden get up, I had that strength to get out of there, and that was a gift from them. So, you know, I owe them something. I don't know. I can't create an idea to act on that. It doesn't matter. There's no separate things. But anyway, I feel like it's great lately that I've had the chance to have an example of embodying something, like passing on this quantum capacity of, it's just the brain speeding up and being able to see what's right around us and know how to appropriately utilize it to take care of ourselves, our bodies, but the bodies of others, keep each other safe, you know, not leave like tripping hazards around. Like, take care of the scene, take care. It's really not complicated. It's so simple. It's a few simple gestures, and that whole vision would come into fruition. We'd enjoy the fruits of that together. And I don't know if I said this already, but as humanity, we sort of have this sense like that if I fly and flower and become myself, that prevents the person beside me from doing so. But if I don't flower, then the other person doesn't, we both stay comfortable. So that would be like saying, if there are 2 birds on the ground, that if one bird decides to take off and fly, that means the other one can't, or it actually decreases the ability of the second bird to fly. But like and that's absolutely not true. The sky is infinite. One bird takes off into the sky. The next bird, if it takes off a second later, has just as much space to fly as the one that took off right before, because it won't necessarily catch up. So, and also if there's a whole flock of birds, one bird takes off, they all start taking off because they think, oh, there's a reason this one took off. So one bird flying actually really increases the likelihood that all the birds can fly. And when they fly together in a flock, it's easier to fly because they change the aerodynamics of the wings by the formations they fly in. So we don't experience this as a flock of humanity. We think, oh, they're flying, that means I can't. And that's just absolutely not true. There's space for all of us to be exactly who we came here to be. And when we can see each other's gifts and see each other's possibilities just by looking in each other's eye, we start bringing that person things that will help them with their possibility without even knowing why. And that's what happens in synchronicity. People start bringing us what we need, and we're like, how is this happening? But somebody saw our possibility. And so there's this possibility energy magnet sort of around us, and people pick up on that, and then they say things to us which are exactly what we need to hear, and we think, or exactly what we need in that moment. So what happens when we're able to act on the moment appropriately, whoever's around us, there's this momentum of they will act with us appropriately. Instead of bringing us some kind of crappy drama, they'll bring us like a piece of chocolate, or they'll bring us, exactly what we were needing in the moment, or say something. We're like, oh, that's kind of what I was investigating. They'll tell us about a book, and we'll be like, yeah, I want to read that. So all of a sudden we start talking about helpful, uplifting, wonderful things, and we start building energy. And I don't know why there's this field that would want us to start to drown again, because what happens is then we need to rely on others. And the thing is, like, the economy thinks if they don't scare us into buying stuff, we won't buy stuff. But we would buy stuff. Like, the economy would continue, and it would be a lot more beautiful if we weren't trying to keep each other mediocre and then buying mediocre stuff. Anyway, I will stop now. I need to get back to reading this, but I think I'm seeing a lot, and there's so much more to talk about that I've written down, but not enough time to talk about it all right now. Back to studying. So these dream and crates are for my partner, and that's why they're pointed out so the other can read them. And these ones are for me. Dream, crate. And then of course I have the cosmos and the rainbow bracelet. I did give a cosmos and rainbow away yesterday, so I need to wear some over here to give away at some point. And I met a friend, so I'm going to give them a little cosmos bracelet with a special message. I got these star essences in the mail. Pineal light infusion and 13th gate.